Everyone, welcome back to the podcast. If you are new here, a special thank you to you for checking out the channel. This channel is primarily geared toward writers, as the title of the channel / podcast indicates. But I really know that so many of the principles that I talk about on this podcast really apply to, well, people in general, right? But especially to creators of some sort. But you will hear me specifically refer to writing and the publishing industry and some of the challenges that writers so commonly face. I am Nicole McInnes. I am a novelist with multiple published books, including Brianna on the Brink and 100 Days, both of which were my YA novels, both of which were traditionally published. I'm also the author of the novel The Gilead, which I indie published. And then I also republished my debut, which was originally traditionally published, after what's called a rights reversion. And I actually discussed that in a different video, so you can sort of look through and see where I discuss that. But in addition to my own writing over the years, I also am the founder of Altitude Press. So we're a very small press. We put out flash fiction anthologies at this point. We're on our third anthology currently. This is now May of 2024 when I'm recording this. And that's been an amazing experience. And it has allowed me to sort of I think deepen my insights into the writing life from a more editorial perspective, which I really didn't have before, unless you counted editing my own work, which I did. But it's a whole different view on this whole writing gig, this whole writing life. In addition to those two things, I also am MFA faculty and writing faculty in general for some different universities, which is just wonderful. I've been an MFA faculty for I want to say going on 8 years now, and that's just been fantastic. So I'm working with writers at the master's level daily, around the clock, around the year, because I do teach summer classes as well. So that's really such a great insight into what it means to pursue writing from that perspective, from the more academic perspective, and often with a goal in mind, such as teaching or sort of giving oneself a little more of a credential when it comes to approaching editors and agents, for example. There are so many reasons people go the MFA route, and I think they're all great. I also love working with younger writers, undergraduates, even high school aged writers. It just really, there's something very, very special about, in my own experience and seeing these writers, there's something very special about that time of life when the world seems at once very overwhelming for many, but also on another hand, in the creative sense, very potentially full of endless possibility. And as we know, those of us who, as we get a little older, we can tend to sometimes lose a little bit of that, right? That just sheer exuberance for what we might be able to accomplish as writers, especially if we have loved reading since we were little kids and books are just magic to us. It can be a really hope-filled and important time when we are sort of fearless. We don't necessarily know some of the things that might come our way if we stick with this path, but I think it's a very foundationally beautiful time in many ways. Again, I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish about it. It doesn't mean it's an easy time. Adolescence is never easy. Being in your 20s is never easy. I don't think any decade is ever really easy, honestly. But for a writer, there can be something, as I said, very foundational. It's almost like the launching pad for a rocket to take off. There's sort of an energy there, and I think there has to be a necessary optimism there for us to continue along the path. And on that note, actually, I would say on sort of the inverse note, what I want to talk about today is rejection. I don't mean for this video to be a downer. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but I think any of us who have been in this writing situation long enough have realized rejection is a fact of life. I mean, it's a fact of life, period, not just for writers, but especially if you are a creative person and you endeavor to become a serious writer, a serious artist of some sort, you have to know, you learn at some point that rejection is inevitable. And it hurts, right? I think there are some people who have a tendency to be able to roll with the punches of rejection a little better, and they tend to be able to pick themselves up and move on. But based on my experience with many writers, my own experience, writers I work with, rejection is not only difficult, but it can be scary. And most devastatingly, it can be like a giant, it can feel like a giant dead end sign that can actually stop writers from moving forward. It can actually feel like this is a sign that my writing is no good, that I shouldn't be doing this, that my parents or whoever might have discouraged you. Not to harsh on parents, but sometimes parents worry about kids going into creative paths, and I think for good reason. It can be a really tough road. The discouraging voices inside our own heads, it can sometimes feel like this is just confirmation of that. So if you get a rejection from, let's say, an agent, you're trying to get an agent because you really want to have your work traditionally published, or you have an agent, but that agent sends your work out on submission to editors at publishing houses, and guess what? More rejections, more no's, and they can feel, when you are the recipient of those rejections, as I have been, as every single writer who has stayed in it sort of for the long haul and who has actually tried to go that route, get an agent, get someone to buy the manuscript, has experienced, it can feel very, very personal. I mentioned at the start of this video that one of my newer things I've been doing is I founded a publishing house, and very small. You hear publishing house and it can sound like I'm the founder of this huge conglomerate. Not true. Very, very small, very sort of cottage boutique publishing house. But it's been a lot of fun, B, a lot of work, and C, incredibly illuminating when it comes to this particular topic of rejection. Because now I find myself on a fairly regular basis, especially when we are open for submissions for an anthology, as we are at the time I'm recording this video, and I'm getting regular submissions in the inbox, and I find myself in the position of, I love it when I accept stories because they're a particularly good fit and the writing's great and the story concept is great, but it's not at all uncommon now for me to have to say to these writers, this is just not the right fit for us. I used to get that exact rejection when I was especially sending out short fiction, and sometimes when I was sending out queries way back in the day to agents, and it always drove me crazy. And it felt somehow at the same time really personal, like I'm being rejected here, and also really impersonal, like, geez, can't you take a little time to explain exactly what it was about my query letter or about my story that didn't work for you? I now get it. I now get how much time it would conceivably take to craft really personalized rejections, because especially as the founder and owner of a small press, you just don't have that time. Time is in short supply. It is precious. I have a day job, my teaching jobs, and it's just not possible. What I really hope every time I have to send a rejection is that my email is not the thing that will cause this writer to say, that's it, I'm done. I'm not putting myself through this. Why would I? It's not worth it, or whatever it is we say. I've said all of those things to myself in years past when I was the writer receiving rejections. And I never was actually serious about it. I was never done, but it had this sort of deadening effect. So I am here today to tell you, please, if you do anything when you get a rejection, allow it to redirect you as necessary. A redirection, a course correction might just mean I need to submit to a different journal or a different outlet. In which case I would say almost always, if you are submitting poems, short fiction, creative nonfiction, essays, for example, and you are getting a no here and there, don't stop. I do think it's always a good idea to take another look at your work, give it to someone else who's knowledgeable. If you have a critique group or even one beta reader, someone who is well-read and who has a good eye for what works or what doesn't work, give it to that person or those people. Let them have a look at it yourself. I'm a big fan, as I've mentioned in other videos, of using read aloud features, like the read aloud feature in Microsoft Word, which I use all the time. There's some other great ones out there. They're free. There's one called Natural Voices. It's free. You can choose the voice you hear the piece of writing read back to you in, and that can be really neat. Try to get a little fresh perspective on the piece and then send it out again and again and again, however many times it takes. Sometimes when I send a rejection, it's because the writer has not read our submission guidelines. And so I'm getting a piece, say our current anthology is a dog-themed anthology. So I'll get a piece that has nothing to do with dogs. A dog isn't mentioned, a dog isn't in the story. It just has nothing to do. And clearly that person probably saw, like on Submission Grinder, for example, that, oh, this press is accepting flash fiction. And so they're just sort of sending it out. I call it carpet bombing. They're kind of sending it out all over the place. And that has nothing to do with the writing. Sometimes it does, but typically it's like, this isn't even in the ballpark because it's not what this anthology is about. But when the writing is actually quite good and I can tell that a piece has been edited, and I've had this experience and it's painful. I'll get stories and I'll think, wow, this person can write. This is really good. And maybe it is thematic. It's thematically correct for the current anthology. But there's something that just makes it's just not right. There's a tone issue, or there's a sort of what do I want to say, like a punchline issue. Not that it's necessarily a satirical piece, but the ending is just like, it's not the vibe we're going for, right? There's something like that just prohibits me from saying yes to it. Those are the ones where I always think, and I will sometimes include a little note, hey, this is really, really well written, keep going, or I hope you find a home for this, words to that effect. I don't say generally keep going. It's not my business whether writers keep going or not, but I sure hope they do. I sure hope you do if this has been you and you've received a rejection in any sense of the word. The same goes for querying agents. There are many agents out there. They typically have specific tastes. They are looking for some things and not looking for other things. So just like with a journal or a small press, know what they're looking for. Read those guidelines. Do your research. There is nothing that can replace doing your due diligence as a writer. Most of the time these days, there's quite a bit of information out there. Most entities and people have websites if they're in the publishing industry, especially agencies, maybe the umbrella, under which they work, the agency in general, small presses, literary journals, poetry journals. Most of them have websites. Look for submission guidelines and please follow for all of these. Follow the submission guidelines. This also pertains to editors who accept what are called unsolicited submissions. So let's say you are an unagented writer. You want to send your work directly to editors. This is something where research is vital because many editors, especially those at the big publishing houses, do not accept unagented submissions for very good reason. They would just get deluged with these and nobody has the time or the staff, right? So some editors do, however, and so you can find those by doing your research. You might even research terms like editors who accept unsolicited submissions, and you can find those people. But when you find them, don't blow your first chance at having them see your work. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. I have brought up that old commercial before on this podcast because it's very, very true in publishing, whether it's a small local indie press or a big conglomerate. Don't blow that first impression by just not bothering to read what they are and aren't looking for, how they prefer to receive submissions, how much they want to see. Many agents, for example, will ask for the first 10 pages or the first 30 pages plus a query plus a synopsis, or maybe just a query. Do not send any of the work. I'll let you know if I'm interested in seeing more. Everyone's a little bit different. So make sure you do that as sort of a hedge against rejection, and also to sort of make sure your rejections are somewhat targeted. You can, at that point, go, okay, I got a no from this person. I was very careful to follow the guidelines. Clearly, the project, as they stated, just wasn't the right fit for them. That hurts. This is my dream agent or my dream editor or my dream journal. That hurts. I need to take the time I need to take to sort of sit with that and process that. And then what am I going to do? What's my plan of action? Please don't go into this pursuit of sending your work out, hoping it will get picked up by an agent, by an editor, by a small press or a large press, whatever it might be. Please don't go into it without a plan for what you are going to do when, not if, the inevitable no comes your way. Once you have written a piece, polished a piece, and you really believe in this piece, you've gotten great feedback on it from readers, all of which I encourage you to do, by the way. Polish a piece of writing to within an inch of its life because you are up against a lot of competition out there. Know what the person you're sending it to is looking for. Make sure you've listened to the feedback you've received, even if you don't necessarily follow all that, which you don't have to. It's your purview. You're the writer. And then have a plan for what your response will be to the no. Now, we all have bad days. Sometimes we get a no during a particularly difficult time. I've had that happen where already I'm not in the greatest headspace. I remember when I was first in my 20s querying agents, and it was by snail mail back then. I mean, back then, it was decades ago. And I would get these rejections in the mail, or I would get requests for let me see pages in the mail, whatever it might be, but it was a slow process. It was kind of a grind. And some days you're kind of having a good day and you can be a little more resilient. Other days, it really hurt. Sometimes it cut pretty deep, and it would stop me from sending out queries for a while until something would kick in and I'd realize, you got to toughen up, girl. If you're going to do this, you've got to be a little tougher and you've got to keep going. So then rather than having to pick myself up each time, I didn't write it down. It wasn't a formal plan, but I did formulate sort of a plan for, okay, what happens when, not if, because I was starting to figure out, hey, my English teachers have always loved my writing. My friends and family have always been really sweet about my writing. But apparently in the big wide world, I'm not such a special little creative type. Everyone's going to just say, oh, I must have this, And that was hard, but it was real. And so I encourage you to save yourself time and do that. Actually write it down, unlike what I did, which was just sort of internalize it, which is also good, but write it down. What am I going to do when I get a no? And then to the best of your ability, be thinking about how you're going to course correct, how you're going to redirect with that piece. Well, maybe it's, I know this piece actually isn't that strong. I was kind of hoping someone would take it and then they would help me fix it. That's not generally how it works, by the way, especially for new untested writers. And by untested, I mean writers whose work has not sort of been out there for public consumption, right? If you're a bestseller and you send in sort of a not the most polished piece of writing, odds are you're going to be fine because editors know what you can do and how your books sell and all of that. But especially if you're newer at this and you are not a sort of a known quantity in the publishing world, you need to be sure that what you are sending out is a top-notch, very, very polished product so that it make it easy for editors and agents and journals, whoever it might be, make it easy for them to say yes, knowing that you're still up against a lot of competition and that there are tons of reasons your work might be getting rejected, okay? Have a plan for a course correction, though. Again, does it mean, okay, I need to sit on this before sending it out anymore? I want to send it out to more readers. I want to think about it some more. I want to rework it. Or is it a question of, no, it's pretty much as strong as it can be. I want to dive back into my research, make sure I'm really developing a nicely targeted list of people I'm sending this to so that I increase my chances that I know this is what they're looking for because I am following those submission guidelines to the letter. That's always another great thing to do and to keep doing even after you get rejections. Keep doing it. Get into bookstores and pick up hard copies of journals and magazines and outlets, poetry journals, poetry based magazines that sort of take a little bit of everything. Those are sort of few and far between these days. It used to be you could go into any major bookstore, any indie bookstore really, and find racks of these hard copy outlets. These days, a lot of them are online and a lot of them are online only. So get online and start looking up, again, say you're a poet, poetry journals, and just start looking at their most recent issues. Buy an issue or two of the journals that are at the top of your list. I would really like to be published in Plowshares, for example. Don't just look at their submission guidelines. Read the journal. Know what it is you're trying to do. And again, if/when you get a no, darn it, it's okay to feel that, especially if this was sort of a dream outlet for you. Maybe you get a no. This happened to me actually not too long ago. It was a couple years ago now. I sort of got the idea that I wanted to submit short fiction again. It had been years and years. I was writing novels, so I wasn't even thinking about it. But I wrote a short fiction piece, sent it to sort of a dream outlet, and I got a no but, which was, this one isn't quite right, but please send us the next thing. That's a great sign, by the way. I didn't send them the next thing because I got so busy with other things. I may still do it someday now that it'll be years later and I don't even know if the same editor is there, but that's okay. That's an indication that they're saying, hey, we really like your work. This just isn't quite the right fit, but keep going, send it back. So if you get that kind of feedback, it's still a no, but pay attention to that. And I would write those down. I would keep a checklist. Some of my students are just masters at Excel and other types of organizational online tools, tech tools it's just amazing to me how they can keep track of submissions. They can keep track of things that get accepted, things that get rejected, the dates they send them out, any further notes such as think of us for your next piece, for example. Do that. Be organized and be cognizant and aware. You have to sort of take yourself out of that dreamland state, that young writer state of just positivity. The world is my oyster. Everything is going to go my way, which again, very special time. And I love working with those writers and maybe gently encouraging them that, hey, protect yourself a little bit too, protect your heart and your creative spirit, because they can really take a beating when you start sending your stuff out there, to have it sort of professionally published, professionally prepared and presented to the reading public. Be organized, have a plan. So I think that's it. I don't think there's anything else I really need to add. But again, my core message in this video is, when your work is rejected, have a plan to redirect your efforts. Don't let it be that dead end sign that you come to and think, oh, there's nothing else. There's no paths off to the side. This is just it. This is my sign. I need to stop. It's not your sign you need to stop. It may be a sign of plenty of other things. I need to revise and edit more thoroughly next time. I need to follow the submission guidelines more carefully, or it simply may just be, I just need to keep doing exactly what I'm doing because I've already really laid a really solid foundation here. It's just a matter of sending it out until it finds the right home. I hope this has been helpful. Again, if you are new to the channel and you like what you see here, you know the spiel. I love the thumbs up. I love the subscribe, whatever. But even if you don't, that's okay too. I wish you well on your writing journey, and hopefully I will see you all soon.